everybody, welcome back to this slightly chilly day in Knoxville. For the astute observers in the crowd, you'll notice that this is in fact not my RS660. This is my second bike that I just picked up last weekend. This is a 2024 Ducati Panigale V4S. I bought it with 13 miles on it. Comparison between the RS660 and the V4S. Ooh, man. It's a crazy bike. The Panigale is just so much faster than the RS660. That's kind of the obvious part, right? Like, this bike can hit speeds that the RS660 struggles to get to. This thing just gets there, no problem. No problem. Yeah, that's obvious, right? Like, everybody expects that. But the thing I wasn't really super prepared for was it actually feels like this bike handles better than the RS660, which is crazy because this bike weighs like 30 pounds more than the RS660 did, and I've taken weight out of the RS660 with the SC project, and you know, so the fact that this bike weighs like 35 pounds more than that bike, and it just wants to turn in so easily, is insane, right? The fact that it's just like, it is super flickable, even I think more than the RS660. That's crazy. It is a more leaned over bike than the RS660 by a pretty reasonable margin. I actually don't think it's super uncomfortable, to be honest. The first time I rode it, I was like, man, this is really leaned over. My back hurts and everything else. And now that I ride it more and more, I think those muscles are starting to develop a little bit, you know, to ride it at this angle. And, you know, it's getting easier and easier, so it's really not bad. I've ridden a 2018 Panigale V4S, and this is seems like a totally different bike to me. This one is just more refined than that one was. That one was not in the break-in period like this one is, and when I talked to the dealer, they told me that this bike, the break-in, it basically has a different tune until you get it serviced for the 620 mile break-in service. They said basically, like, you might as well not even put it in race A and race B because it really doesn't do anything. The bike is just, you know, kind of locked down a little bit. But that bike was just really, that bike was violent. This bike is I mean, it's still really fast, like I said, but it's not as violent and as, you know, kind of I wouldn't say it's not as raw, because it definitely feels very raw, but it's just a little more refined. I think the safety stuff is doing stuff in the background before you even realize it. Humid day out, my visor keeps fogging up. Man, going over these bumps, this, you know, these cracks in this concrete right here, this thing with the smart suspension, I mean the semi-active suspension, man, it just absorbs it. Like, this would be a pretty bouncy ride on the RS660, and this thing just takes it. You barely even feel it. So like I said, this is a bit of a chilly day, and right now I can feel this bike starting to warm up a little bit. It's not as bad as the 2018 I rode, but it definitely still gets a little warm. I'm curious how it's going to be on a warm day, because right now it's 68 degrees out, and so yeah, I don't know, it might be a bit toasty on a warm day. I've ridden this bike before with full leather race suit, and the leather actually seems to insulate you from the heat a little bit. You don't really notice. And also, I mean, while you're riding down the road on this bike right now, going 70 miles an hour, I mean, it's not bad. It pulls the heat out pretty well. When you sit there and stop at a stoplight, that's when it starts to get pretty hot pretty quick. And if you look at the temperature gauge, it gets pretty hot. Like right now, I think we're at 2 bars. We'll get up to 4 bars, and there's a max of 5. if we just sit at a stoplight for like a minute or so. I mean, it really quickly gets warm. The overall fit and finish of this bike, with one exception, is really good. I would say it is better than the RS660, and I like the RS660's fit and finish. There are some people I've heard complain about it, but I really like the RS660's fit and finish. This is considerably better than that, with one exception, and that's the throttle tube. The throttle tube has a lot more play in it than my RS660 did, and that's not something I would have expected on a $30,000 super bike. One other interesting thing to note, this bike has the same type of Brembo Stylema brake calipers and Brembo master cylinder for the brakes that the RS660 does, but the brakes are considerably better on this bike than they are on the RS660. There is more initial bite than there was on the RS660, and there's just more overall braking force than there was on the RS660. I can't really say that the RS660's ever had brake fade, not that I've seen anyway. Maybe if you are a better and faster rider than I am, maybe you can get brake fade, but I've never had a problem with it. But the bite, the initial bite on the brakes on this are a little bit better. They're not as aggressive as like the S1000RR's brakes. Those brakes, I found myself like just accidentally jamming on the brakes way too hard. This, you can I'm used to the RS660, and every now and then I'll grab it just a little bit too much, but it's really not unmanageable. It's not bad at all. But like I said, not as much initial brake bite as the S1000, but certainly a ton of braking force. The transmission on this bike is phenomenal. It's way better than the RS60. This is one area that like it absolutely outclasses the RS660. The RS660, the quick shifter would, if you weren't at like full throttle and you shifted from second to third or something like that, and you're like halfway up the RPM range, that bike would just violently shake. This one just smooth, and it doesn't matter what RPM you're at, it doesn't matter what throttle percentage you're at, what gear you're in, it's just smooth. It's not as smooth again as the S1000, but it's really, really close. I would say, at least from my very limited experience with it, I would say that this bike feels sharper than the S1000 that I rode a little while ago. I'm gonna kind of shut up and stop talking for a minute and just kind of enjoy these twisty roads. handling is just phenomenal. You can put the bike just wherever you want on the road. Yeah, clicking down into first gear using the auto blipper is just piece cake.